in this game. That be for Muslims, Christian, Jews, it doesn't matter. But when I have a school that have multicultural kids, I think it will serve my purpose as an educator to educate myself about these kids. That has not been the case. And what could the NAACP do? And I'm going to summarize with this. The NAACP is a great organization. But for some reason or another, again, I'm going to break this, there is a gap between other civic and social organizations and the NAACP. Maybe because of the gentleman who said, most people think, well, maybe it's just a black organization. Maybe, but I know for the last 2 years or 3 years, the Arabic organizations have made a great attempt and there is a great cooperation going on. I hope for that to go on because the mission of the NAACP is the mission of any decent human being, which is acceptance of others, because we're not going anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who think they've been in this town for 200 years or 300 years or 400 years, we're gonna be here for the next 50 years and the next 100 years, and we're not going anywhere, and everybody needs to take a note of that. And you could call me a Yemeni, call me Iraqi, call me Pakistani, but I am an American as good as anybody else, and you ought to take a thought of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. El-Sadat, I thank you for your comments. And as you're praising the NAACP, I want to also extend the praise to everyone who showed up here, because obviously you all are concerned about this issue. And we really appreciate that you are going to take this back with you, and maybe we'll get something done in the city about these issues, continue the conversation. And now we're going to turn it on to our third special guest. This is Butch Hollowell, the General Counsel from the Detroit NAACP.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. Well, thank you. First of all, I just wanted to go back to the students for a minute. They were all incredibly impressive. I do have to say that Simone is going to be in Congress. I mean, just incredibly poised, and I just can't believe how clearly she was and how at ease she was in front of everybody. Did you notice that? I mean, just amazing. So I will say this, I am with the NAACP in Detroit, and I serve as their chief counsel. I did come, you asked a little bit about the organization, I did come to the organization from a very young age. My grandmother, when I was in 5th grade, got me an album. I know there are just CDs now, but there was actually an album back then of Dr. King's speeches. And she got it for me for my birthday, and I memorized all the speeches. And she entered me into speech contests. And so I won one of the contests, the Brother Rice Invitational. And after that, I started giving speeches, and I started thinking, I like what he's saying in these speeches. And that's when I started thinking about becoming a lawyer and a civil rights lawyer. I also have in my blood this, which I didn't know until a little bit later, which is interesting. My Uncle Donald Hollowell was one of the great legal minds of the civil rights movement. He was Dr. King's chief lawyer and was Thurgood Marshall's right-hand man. So he was the one who argued the case that desegregated the University of Georgia, and I heard about the cases, where he would be defending Dr. King in, let's say, criminal cases in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, and very often they would be in a courthouse, and there'd be a mob outside that wanted to string them up. And so they would have to not just argue the case and win the case, but they had to get out of there alive. So I heard stories about how they had to figure out the logistics of how to get cars outside of the bathroom windows so that they could leave through the bathroom, go out of the bathroom window, get into a waiting car, and he and Dr. King would often lay in the trunk of the car, side by side, as they would escape of some of these dusty courthouses in Alabama, Mississippi, and other places in the Deep South. So when I think of the cases that I'm involved in, on behalf of the NAACP, and I think it's a difficult case. Mudassir and I were just talking about a case that I'm getting ready to bring dealing with redistricting, and I think this is a tough case. They had tough cases, and so I also brought with me here today the pamphlet from today's funeral of Dr. Arthur L. Johnson. Some of you remember Dr. Johnson, but I'm not going to let this opportunity at this forum here today pass without saying a few words about the great Dr. R. Johnson. He passed away a couple days ago, and he was the long-standing president of the NAACP in Detroit, as well as prior to that time, he was the executive director. What a lot of people don't realize, he held both roles for some. He was the only person to have ever held both positions. He was in that great class of 1948 at Morehouse College. So he was a classmate of Dr. King's at Morehouse. And when he graduated, the National NAACP asked him to leave at Georgia and come to Detroit to kind of put Detroit on the map, which he very much did. He transformed the Detroit chapter into what it is today, which is the largest chapter in the United States. Reverend Nick Hood, a lot of you know Nick Hood, who was on the Detroit City Council, but his father came before him on the city councils. And Reverend Nicholas Hood Sr. got up this afternoon and said something that I thought was also important that I didn't know about the founding of the NAACP. He says, a lot of you don't remember this, but they didn't have a building. They were working out of a place on Gratiot Avenue. They had no money. And the guys who owned the Gotham Hotel, and back in the day, because the city was not integrated, you had to have your own hotels and your own hospitals and your own, shoe stores and all this. This was pre-integration Detroit. Okay, so you had black hotels. Don't have them today, but you had back then. So they had the Gotham Hotel. They were, they said this. Judge Keith was there. He said, they were numbers runners, but they supported the NAACP, and they would bring a little check in the afternoon to pay the secretary and to keep the lights on, and it grew. And so Dr. Johnson, one of the first things he did when he got his feet on the ground is none of the hospitals here were not integrated, and so if you got ill, you had to go to Kerwood, Sumby, what was it? Bethune was another one, and Dunbar, and so they were trying to integrate the hospitals. My father was one of the first doctors to integrate. He was the first black surgeon here. Like some of you know, Dr. Melvin Hollowell. Art Johnson latched on to the fact that there's often federal money that is involved as it relates to the hospitals and what the hospitals take. So he began to fight the hospitals to admit black doctors so that we could treat all patients. And he was able to convince Phil Hart, who was then the U.S. Senator, to say, you know what, we're not going to let any federal money come in here if you're not going to let African-American doctors practice medicine. It broke open the hospital system, including for doctors like my father. Again, like I said, who was the first surgeon here. And what I didn't know until the funeral today was that group of doctors was so grateful for what Dr. Johnson had done to open up the healthcare field here in the area that they decided to band together, and they put together the first Freedom Fund dinner here in Detroit, which of course now is the largest sit-down dinner in the United States. And I knew of Dr. Lionel Swan in terms of his role in that original, but I never knew that the black doctors were the ones who really were the foundation for that. So I'm very proud to be in the organization. We've got a lot of things going on. I'm just going to take another second to talk about that. We've got a lot of very active cases. Many of them deal with the lack of understanding between people. That's really what it all comes down to. And how do you bridge that? That's always, an interesting question. I think, frankly, it takes a lot. But very often you can't break down a barrier unless you're kind of with somebody, kind of in the trenches. So very often I found that that's what breaks down barriers. I'm also a musician and a singer. And I know that, for example, if you're in the band with somebody, or you're singing, or you're playing music with somebody, all those barriers break down. I played sports growing up. If you're on a sports team And, you know, and you're in the locker room and you're on the field and all that, very often that breaks down a lot of barriers. So if you're kind of in a situation where, you know, you don't have peer pressure and you can just see people for who they are, it helps a lot. When I was in college, I had never met anyone who'd grown up on a farm. But there were a number of people who came from farming backgrounds that was new to me, you know, when I went away to school. So, you know, I had these conceptions in my mind about what they were, and I'm sure they had the same conceptions about me, and hopefully some of those things broke down a little bit. That gets us to one of our lawsuits. We're now in federal court. They passed a constitutional amendment here in Michigan known as Proposal 2. Remember when Ward Connerly came in to ban affirmative action? And it passed by an overwhelming margin, by 58%. And our so-called liberal friends, a lot of them voted for that. You know, it passed with 58% of the vote, as I said. Well, we filed a challenge in federal district court to stop that implementation. We lost in federal district court, but it was appealed. We appealed it to the United States Court of Appeals, and we did get an opinion this summer in July of the United States Court of Appeals. We won that case, where a 2-to-1 panel indicated that schools can use diversity, because that's really what we're talking about in here. We're talking about diversity. Why is that important? You know, you can have diverse classrooms. Universities and colleges can't do that in order to have excellence, and that is what diversity is. That's the principle. That has been the front principle of the NAACP for much of the past century, and that is equal access to good education. So the Attorney General, Bill Schuette, the new Attorney General, has appealed it again, which we knew he would. And so now the full Sixth Circuit in Cincinnati, there are 9 judges that were appointed by Republican presidents and 7 judges that have been appointed by Democratic presidents. They will hear the case in March. And after that, there'll be another appeal, as you probably all know. This will go to the U.S. Supreme Court. But the principle is important for us to fight, and that is, again, diversity in the classroom. Because when you see different outcomes, when you see different points of view, you become better. You're smarter, you're more intelligent, and you say, oh, I didn't know about that perspective, I didn't know about that perspective. I also want to say that we're working very hard on classroom overcrowding. We met with the emergency financial manager last Friday, Roy Roberts. We're very concerned, and if we don't get some relief in the area of overcrowding, we will file a case as well against the state, which has jurisdiction now over Detroit schools. Our independent reports are that Detroit classrooms have now 50 to 60 to 70 students per class. Now imagine, how many people would you say is in this room today? If you had to count.
50,
Huh?
60,
All right, so can you imagine 60 third graders in a classroom? That is not education. And teachers can't teach and students can't learn. And that is a return to Brown versus Board of Education, separate but unequal. I made that case to the superintendent, Reverend Anthony, I did on Friday. He has indicated that he will get back to us quickly, but if that does not occur, I can assure you we'll challenge that in court as well. I think the last thing that I'll deal with is the issue as it relates to redistricting, and also these are different communities working together. These are the lines of political boundaries that have been drawn, the maps that have been drawn for Congress and for the State House and Senate are absolutely unjustified, and we believe illegal under the Voting Rights Act. And one of the things that they did, which was most troubling, and I served as legal counsel for the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus, as well as for the NAACP, is that they took the Hispanic community in Southwest Detroit, which is a very politically cohesive and culturally cohesive community, and they drew the line right down the middle, split it right down the middle, so that the Hispanic community would be eviscerated, and so that it would not be able to elect a candidate of their choosing. And so we talk about Muslim and Arabic and African American relations. Also, I think we should be talking about the Black-Brown Coalition, the Black, with the Latino community as well, many different communities. I'm very pleased to be here today. I think this is awesome. I think that whenever we have these fissures, these tensions, these breaks in between communities of color, those in power love it. They love it. As long as we're fighting amongst ourselves, they're loving it. We have to figure out a way to bridge those gaps, because if we come together and we exercise our power through the ballot and other instances, there's no stopping us. So that's what I have to say.
Yes, thank you. Let's give a nice round of applause to our three guests. You hit the last point, you hit right on the spot. I appreciate that's exactly what we're all trying to find common ground here in Hamtramck. And when you say common ground, I didn't know you were a singer and a musician. I'm a musician, so we have something else in common. Okay. And we also have some issues in common here. We all want a good educational system here for sure. We all want peace and security in our lives. And it's not bad to have some good friends next door living to us, so whatever nationality or color they are. The whole society works much better when we can all get along. It does start on a personal one-to-one basis, for sure, first of all. And I think blaming parents or whatever, I think what we're really saying here is adults are responsible. Adults not only at home, but adults in education and school and teachers, adults politicians, adults running our government, the adults who are setting policy. Those are the ones who are also responsible. So we're not trying to blame anybody here at this point. We just want to try to find out how to fix this issue. I do want to mention some statistics before we open it up to any comments, remarks, questions you might have. Hamtramck here, for example, if you're not aware of the fact, Hamtramck has probably the highest percentage of Muslims in any city in America. According to Dawood Walid from CARE, estimated anywhere between 50-60% of Muslims live in Hamtramck. That's by far the highest, more than half of the people in the city. Arabs and Muslims in government are very few in number. We have probably 1 or 2 elected officials in the entire history of Hamtramck in the Arab community, Muslim community. Michigan, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, has more hate groups in Michigan than any other state in the country. We're very fortunate in Hamtramck to not have any serious incidences. We're going to make sure we don't have any, and this is the way we prevent it, by talking together and finding ways to solve these issues before they get out of control. So we do have issues just like everybody else. There's racism in America. I don't think any of us are trying to cover up the idea that this exists, and even though we don't like to admit that, statistics show that there's hate in this country, and we want to fight it off. So we also should mention that not all Muslims, for example, are not Arabs. We all understand that. There's Chaldean Arabs that are Christian. There's the Palestinians who are Christians also. So we're not talking only about Muslim Arabs. We're talking about Arabs, people of color. Let's put it that way, because as our friend here, Al-Saddah, said, it's the skin color. It gets down to that point. It doesn't matter what your nationality is or what country you're from. People pick on each other because of their color, or defy them an opportunity because of their color, or because they're gay, or because some other issues, the way they act in society. So we want to make sure that each of us has equal opportunity in this land that we're trying to create of democracy and freedom. So I'd like to have some remarks or questions from the audience. Anybody have anything to say to our guests? Okay, Bob Zolik, let's start this out.
My comment relative to the statement you made that the city officials and the school officials should be in that leadership role. Granted, I agree with you there. But with that leadership, it's important, incumbent, that the community encourage and be there to encourage that leadership. Now, I probably have a better attendance record at our city council meetings than our elected officials, some of our elected officials. And I can't speak for the school. But I do not see the diversity of residents and other group community leaders participating in those processes. And I say that because, granted, unless there's that pressure to make changes And as you mentioned, with respect to the police department, and the cultures that exist in the police department, we've been trying for years to change and break that culture. But again, it needs the pressure from the community and from all the various leaders to continue to make that pressure to change. Unfortunately, as an attorney knows, we deal with contracts, we deal with litigation, we deal with a number of obstacles in trying to make changes. And we, within the NAACP, have raised a number of issues, a number of things that we've wanted to do within the city. But again, it goes by the side because we don't have that constant pressure from all the various communities we have in this community, in Hamtramck. And I'd like to look, yes, I'm running for public office, but I also identify the fact we have a 20-20-20-20 situation in Hamtramck. 20% Arab, 20% Bangladesh or Indian, 20% African American, 20% Polish, and the rest 20% mixed. But yet I don't see those numbers coming and participating in the city. So I agree with you. There should be leadership, but the leadership should also get the support from the community. They should be at these public meetings, voice opinions, and be critical. It's got to be a constant thorn in their side. That way we'll get changes made. And you'll see the leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. I do agree with you. And I have to say that anybody will blame anybody for their mistakes is making a mistake and doing a disservice to themselves. And I wanted to state the record straight when I spoke about the school, city officials, and the police department. They are the leaders in the community. They are, by virtue of what they do, the leaders of this community. If our school does not take its full moral and legal responsibilities in educating our children, and then year after year, when we have fights after fight, month after month, I think it's a problem. I mean, what is it going to take? Kids killing each other, and then we're going to say, I am sorry? I stand right here. I will stand right here, and of all our respected educators. I spoke about these issues 20 years ago. And I am telling you right now, I've been continued in my work as a social worker and other capacities, and it's the same problems every year. And I have seen in every other community. We meet for economic reasons. If we need to sweep our streets, we get the communities, the business right, and we do that. When we have an issue, we meet, we do the community. When it comes to our own kids, when it comes to our own understanding and our existence, we have not seen any offer. With all due respect to you, not the mayor, not the city council, we have not seen a great efforts where we say, okay, how about if we get a conference like this? Get all the communities leaders. And I am not here endorsing one community over the other. I'm talking about community issues. Cleaning the street is my responsibility and yours. It doesn't matter what color you are. Getting a good education, your kids and my kids, we need them to get a good education. That have nothing to do with colors or barriers. Where are these meetings? Where have they taken place? Why aren't the politicians taking place? We wait until something happens and then we say, well, I did this, I had a perfect record, I did this, I did that, and then politicians fight among themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about 5 kilos or maybe 1 mile. Come on, we should know each other better. I mean, this is not like a huge community where we could blame each other and say, you know what, I didn't know my neighbor. No, you know your neighbor. Just make the effort. That's all it takes. And when I spoke directly to those people in the top, because it is their moral and their legal responsibilities to address these issues that they are not foreign to them. Bear in mind, now, if we have different issues every time, I could say, yes, we need to deal with them. It's the same issue. Thank you, good.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mia. This is wonderful, okay? And I'd like to thank NAACP for getting us out here. Unfortunately, this type of forum does not take place the way it needs to. It needs to happen more often. It needs to happen with the city officials, the community leaders, the liaison from the NAACP, or other organizations that we have in this community. It's not being utilized. You cannot have one forum and one meeting and solve anything. It's not gonna happen. These type of forums need to happen periodically, whether it be a quarterly or more often. You cannot wait for violence to take place, for our children to be hurt, then all of a sudden, oh, let's sit down and find a solution. The problem has never went anywhere. The problem has been there when I went to Hamtramck High School back in the 1990s. And the problem still continues today. We had those fights back in 91 when I was attending Hamtramck High School. I was probably the 6th or 7th, colored individual in that school. It was a handful of us. And we faced those issues. Now you have maybe 50-50 or whatever the numbers are, I don't have, but you're still facing the same issues today. Those issues not going to go away, and it's not going to go away with us holding one forum or one meeting and understanding some of the young guys that came up there before some of their issues. I'm sorry, I forget your name.
Tisa Franklin.
Tisa Franklin. As the way she brought up the issue, it has a lot to do with the differences that we are facing. It's not only about racism, it's about what do you have on versus what do I have on. I can go and date, this nice young lady. Next thing you know, I'm having problem from her group of people. Why are you taking my girl? Even though that has nothing to do with him or anybody else. So a lot of those issues are coming from the community because of knowledge. We have neighborhoods that neighbors don't even know their names. They don't even know who or how many people is living next door to them. Whether it's a family or an old gentleman or older couple that maybe I need to keep an eye out for. I look out for my neighbor because I want them to do the same for me.
That's right.
So we need to have, and I urge not only NAACP, but any other community organization that's out here, let's make these forums a regular thing instead of waiting for some boil to pop and then we talk about issues. Let's talk about these on a more consistent basis so we're not waiting for children to be hurt or waiting for our community just be so distant from each other that we have no idea who our neighbors are or what's going on in this neighborhood. Like you said, very small community. We should be able to walk out here and know maybe 50% of the neighborhood out here. I should be able to walk down my street and know 90% of the homes and who live there and what their first names are. Not only one or two. And that's the only way you're going to get away from the issues that we are facing as far as the differences. Once we all get together, sit down, understand the struggles, understand the differences, we're all human. At the bottom line, we're all human. It has nothing to do with where we come from. I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, just like you said. I'm raising 2 kids. They're not going anywhere. I am more American than anybody else, and vice versa.
Good for you.
My experience is that people don't like to be lectured to. And so when we talk about with our kids, it's like, you need to do this. I don't think it really works that way. I think people need a project. They need something that they can work together on. And I think we can say you should be getting together, but if it doesn't feel natural, it might not happen. So I think we could use forums like this as a launching pad to say, okay, is there some project we can work together on? Is it a voter registration thing? Is it a community cleanup thing? Is it, whatever it is, is it a play? Is it music? Is it something where they can work together on, as opposed to just saying this is what you should do? Because I think if you just tell people this is what you should do, I don't think it naturally happens. So I think, my sense is that people come together because they're